it seemed like this fight could have been like a make it or break it moment, since everyone headed into the fight, from the media to the fans, were thinking that Max Holloway just did him in and he wouldn't be able to bounce back. But you were on the inside, being able to watch him slowly get back to where he needed to be. So when you saw all that talk going on from the outside, what were you thinking internally?
It was just take it day by day. Our process was slower than a lot of people would have probably had theirs been. We took 6 months of no contact, and then we eased him back into training, and with the idea that we were going to try to sit out close to a year at the earliest, come back in the fall. And I know Calvin wanted to fight sooner than that, and that's what you want your fighter to want. You want him to come back and try to get it back. But I just felt like we had some things that we wanted to work on. I think Max exposed some things in that fight, and we just needed to take some time to, number one, heal, but then number two, really fill some holes in the boat. And he'd been in fight camp for 3 straight years prior to that, really. So it was the first time where we finally got to let his hands and his nose heal, rest his body, and then really come to practice and training sessions without worrying about a bout agreement. It's all right, we have to work on this right now. And I think some of those things came out. You saw that in the fight with some of the A-range weapons, like the elbows, and him holding his ground a little bit, him pressuring, and then the wrestling. So, and then when he did get to the ground, his jiu-jitsu looks a lot better. So I think, obviously the plan paid off, but it was a tough year for sure.
Immediately in the first round, when Giga had that slip up, he immediately knew to go for the takedown. So headed into that fight, it was such an instinct reaction. Was that something you guys really drilled into him coming into this fight?
Yeah, we were driving to Maine an hour. It's I would drive an hour to Calvin's house, pick him up, drive an hour and a half to Maine to get a session with Dupree in Portland, Maine. And that was the whole thing, is anytime we're close enough to touch this kid, we have to connect our hands and make him wrestle. We're not playing jiu-jitsu. We're not just striking with him. We're going to make him wrestle. We're going to grab onto him, slam him to the ground, make him wrestle. Just keep your hands connected, whether it be body lock, single, double, whatever. Just connect your hands, make him wrestle. He'll tire him out. And it was a lot of work. And it was even in the sparring sessions, there was times where Calvin he'd have opportunities to grab the guys and we're listen, you got to go for this. And, over the course of a 15-week camp, it was it came out on fight night. The minute he saw an opening to connect his hands, you saw how fast he sprinted in there and just picked him up. There was no delay, threw him to the mat, controlled on the top. And I was super proud that came out in the fight, because 15 weeks you work on that and it doesn't come out at first, and then you're just hoping that, hey, we got 25 minutes, I hope this comes through, and fortunately it did. And I think it had a huge impact on the fight.
From a manager's perspective as well, what were your thoughts of how he should handle the media and everything going on outside of the cage?
I always say just be yourself, and Calvin's not a big talker. He's not a trash talker. I think you look back at the Max fight, he had that one line that he said about, if this was high school, I'd be the senior, you'd be a freshman, and come fight Ed, I'm gonna treat him like a freshman. That was after 5 hours of UFC camera people grilling him to say, hey, well, if he said this, you're the best boxer, right? And they kind of goat you into that because they're looking for storylines. And I think Calvin learned from that experience, and that's not what he likes to do. And I think Max, that came out in the fight, Max kind of threw some shade at him during the fight, and he's like, no, respect, man, I said it. So going into this fight, it was just put the blinders on, focus on what we can control. And Calvin will do the media, but he's not talking crap. He's not going to react to all that other stuff, and it's 100%. I know people might not think it's real, but when that title fight opportunity opened up, that wasn't anything that we were considering. We were we have to beat Giga Chikadze. That's the only thing we can control right now. So it was interesting seeing all the media about him asking for a title fight, him saying I deserve this, and tweeting to everybody else that's talking about it, tweeting to the champ and all that stuff. And I said this last week before the fight, I was like, I hope he's thinking about Alex, because we're thinking about him. And, it's not the best look when you don't win after saying stuff like that. So Calvin's he was just focused on Chikadze and then all the people that were doubting him, with the odds being plus 200 underdog. And I think he handled it great.
And you've been in this game since you said 2006, when you went full time with coaching, and the sport has changed so much since then. So what have you noticed as a coach in the evolution of MMA? That's the biggest thing that you've had to adjust to as a coach and a manager.
So I started training in 2006, and then I stopped fighting in 2012. And then I was parlaying coaching into then. But so the biggest thing I've noticed since I've been in the sport is it's definitely come more mainstream. Like back then, it was like a fringe sport. I mean, my first few fights, and even Calvin back in the day, it's like kind of showed up to weigh-ins and you found out who you're going to fight. And now it's much more sanctioned, more organized. You know, we're on ESPN now. And back then, I feel like back early, it was really a meritocracy. The best fighters made it in, and the best fighters got title shots. And now, really, there's this whole, you know, media part of it that, you know, the loudest guy that's somewhat decent can get title shots now. So I think that's a big change, and you're starting to see that in the younger fighters that coming through. And you know, they get the Facebook page with the fan group and the, you know, the sponsored shirts, and they're looking for sponsors in their first amateur fight and all this stuff. And so just get good at fighting, you know. And so I think, you know, it's that Conor McGregor effect, which, you know, Conor McGregor, there's only one Conor McGregor. He can go and do that. And like, there's only one Sean O'Malley, and there's certain guys that can pull this off and do it because it comes natural to them and it doesn't distract from the training. But all these other young kids that are jumping in, trying to kind of duplicate that, and it just distracts from the training. So you're starting to see a lot of that. People trying to like be famous more than trying to be good at fighting. And I call our team, we call those the blue check mark guys. Those are guys that get into fighting because they want to go to the UFC. They want to get that blue check mark, but they don't really want to put in the work. And you're starting to see a lot of those guys get to the UFC now just because of the Contender Series. So you're starting to see like a very interesting dynamic of the people that are in the UFC now versus even 5 years ago.
Boo! If you're enjoying this video, please like and subscribe.
Going back to when you said you were in the fighting days and you find out who you're fighting the day of, what is your fight background?
I was a high school wrestler, and then I played lacrosse in college. And after college, I was just so bored that I just started doing jiu-jitsu, and then said I would help a friend get ready for a fight and cornered him for that. And I was like, oh, I'd love to do one fight. And then that turned into 15 fights. And then while I never got into it to try to go to the UFC. I got into it to just be back on a team and you know, be active and challenge myself and probably lose weight and all that stuff. So as I was doing it, I started doing all right, winning some fights. And then my teammates were mostly strikers. So they were, you know, and I was like a purple belt at the time and I was a wrestler. So I was helping them with the grappling stuff. And then, so that turned into me cornering all of them. And then I was getting myself fights. So they're like, hey, can you get me a fight? You know, so then I had guys like Rob Font getting his first amateur fight, asking me to get him a fight. And that's how I became a manager. And the coach was just, I helped my friends because they couldn't defend a takedown. So I was like, well, I'm not just going to keep throwing them around the gym all day. I'll teach them how to defend this. And so then I just became, and I was a little older than them. I was, 4 or 5 years older than most of them. So they were, you know, I just became like an uncle, you know, like a big brother that was helping them and built trust over time. And then we were fortunate enough that turned into Rob going to the UFC and these other guys reaching out saying, can you manage me too? And then next thing you know, I'm coaching these guys and we're headlining cards. And sometimes you just take a step back and you're like, how the hell did we get here? You know, it's kind of surreal.
And now you guys are known as the New England Cartel, and things have kind of grown so organically in terms of the relationships. But beforehand, you were at a sales job, working probably an 8 to 5 job. So at what point did you know that you could take this full-time as a full-time coach and then into management as well?
I didn't ever know that I could. I didn't ever think it was that realistic, but it was 2014. I got laid off from my sales job. I was looking for another job, and my wife, you know, we weren't even married yet. This was like March of 14, and we were getting married, and we weren't even engaged yet. So it's like a year before we got married. We just moved in together in October, and she was like, I don't think you should go back to sales. She was like, you don't love it. Like, do this MMA thing. And at that point, no one was in the UFC. So then that was March. And then in May, Rob got the call to join the UFC. So it was kind of like serendipitous how it all came together. And I never knew if I'd make it and make money or anything like that. I just felt like you only got this one little window to kind of chase that dream and do something you love and follow your passion, so to speak. And I did that. And then it just, one little thing after another, we just kept hitting these little check marks, like we call them. And, you know, now I'm at the point where I'm making more than I was in sales. So it was, you know, I got lucky that I had someone like my wife that believed in me. And then fast forward a couple years after that, someone like Rob Font that was like, hey, listen, like, I need to make a change. let's start our own thing. You know, he was the impetus of that. Like, he was like, we need to leave this gym that we're at and we need to do our own thing, because right now we're kind of doing our own thing, but in someone else's house. So let's go do our own thing and like do it the right way. And that's where I came up with the whole concept of the small group training. And this is how we're going to do it. You know, we only have 4 fighters on the team, and it's on purpose. And it's been quite the journey last 4 years since we broke off.
That's amazing. Like the brotherhood between all the fighters and the support from your wife. Obviously, you must have been very confident in the future of it, just because of the random occurrence and you had with meeting Dana White on a plane. I can't remember what year you said that was, but it was just a random chance that happened. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that story?
So that was 2006. I went to Vegas for the 4th of July, and on the way back, I saw a guy in front of me on the plane, like in the line to get on in the jetway with the Ultimate Fighter bag. And I was just starting to watch the UFC at that time. So I tapped him on the shoulder and I was like, "Oh, you watch UFC?" And he turned around and it was Dana White. I didn't even know Dana White's name. I just knew he was the guy that ran the UFC. And he's like, "Oh, hey, you know, you're a fan, blah, blah," you know, shook hands. And then I get on the plane and he comes and he sits right next to me. He's like, "Oh, I guess I'm next to you." I talked his ear off for 5 days or 5 hours about how I had like done jiu-jitsu for 2 classes and, you know, all this stuff. And he flew me out the next weekend. Well, I flew myself out, but he gave me tickets the next weekend to the UFC pay-per-view, and it was Arlovsky versus Tim Sylvia. So that was the first time I'd been to a UFC fight, and I was hooked at that point. I was like, I got to make this walk one day. And that was 2006, and I had my first fight at the end of 2008. And yeah, I mean, I think everything happens for a reason, you know, like meeting him and then getting my fight, and then also like the first job, that job I was working when I met Dana White, I sat across from this other kid who talked me into doing jiu-jitsu, which is why I got into the UFC. I started watching UFC because I started doing jiu-jitsu. And that kid ends up being Rob Font's girlfriend. He's been with the same girl for like 17 years. It's Rob Font's girlfriend's older brother.
Oh my gosh.
So his name's Edwin. So I knew Edwin for, 4 or 5 years before I even knew who Rob was. And he was the reason I got into jiu-jitsu. And then I ended up meeting Dana White. So I wanted to do the UFC stuff. And then fast forward, I'm at this gym and now Rob's watching me hit mitts. And then he's like, "Oh, you know," and then we knew each other for like a year before I realized who he was, that he knew Edwin and that he was dating Edwin's sister. So it's just like everything. There's definitely a lot of serendipitous moments.
Yeah, everything's definitely so connected, especially in the Northeastern region. I feel like even if it's not Boston in particular, I feel like everyone is connected in that sense. So thinking back to that moment where your goal was just to make the walk, and then now you have fighters that are in title contention, what are the goals for 2022 that you guys are looking for?
The goal every year is the same. It's just we need to get a belt. You know, that was our goal. We set out to do this, and our goal is really 2 belts: one for Rob, one for Calvin. And you know, the UFC's never really had like a Boston-based champion. I know we got Glover now in Connecticut, but he's like Connecticut, New York. You know, those guys. It's like fake New England. But you know, we keep saying that we're going to be the first ones to bring a belt back, and that was always the goal. And every year, you know, it changes a little bit based on where you're at. But you know, a year ago we were sitting pretty. You know, we had Rob and Calvin both kind of big wins, and then unfortunately the Max thing happened. But fast forward a year, we get one more. We get that big win last weekend. We're right back there. You know, so who knows what 2022 will hold? But all we can do is focus on whatever the next fight is and win it, and then hopefully get one step closer to the belt.
And just out of curiosity, what was your take on the Volkanovski-Holloway fights, the first one and then the second one, both going to decision?
Yeah, the first one was impressive. I was really surprised. I didn't think Volkanovski was going to beat Holloway, but then when he did, and then the second one, we were on Fight Island. We were doing a training session, so we watched that fight. We were fighting Wednesday night, and that fight was, I think, Saturday. So we watched it, and as we were watching it, it was like, I was like, "Oh, Alex did it again. He won." But then, or no, so I thought Max won the second one, and then they said to Alex. But then when I was studying video for the Max fight, then I was like, all right, I can kind of see why they gave it to Alex. So it was just such a close fight, and depending on what you were scoring and that. But you know, those 2 guys right now have proven that they're at a different level than everybody else in the division until someone proves otherwise. You know, you got Alex and Max, and then you got the call them the tier 2 guys, whatever. Then you got like the Yair, Ortega, us, and Zombie, and then there's like the tier 3 below us. So it's until one of us 4 proves that we can beat Max or Alex, then right now those two guys are in a league of their own, and that's what we're striving to do, is prove that we can beat one of those guys.
And so every time Calvin is asked who he wants next, he's very indifferent. He's just like, every fighter presents its own different types of problems that you're going to have to game plan, that you're going to have to try to solve. So from a coach's perspective, even though saying who you would want doesn't have any effect on anything, just out of curiosity, who do you think is the best matchup for Calvin headed into the rest of 2022?
I think if you look at the three that are in front, take Max out of the equation. He's fighting for the title next once he's healthy. So take him out of the equation. The three guys in front of us, I think the best fight would be Zombie. I think he's probably the best matchup for Calvin. Short, mostly, we know what he brings to the table. We saw, he had to take Ige down to beat him, and Ige is a tough kid, great kid. I like him. I like his coaches, but I think there was no questioning the fact that we had a big advantage on the feet with Ige, and then Zombie didn't. It was pretty equal. So like, obviously MMA math doesn't always work out that way, but I think we would handle Zombie pretty well on the feet. I also don't think he'd be able to take us down. So I think his jiu-jitsu, the perceived jiu-jitsu advantage there that they might think he'd have just because they haven't seen our jiu-jitsu wouldn't be there, because they wouldn't be able to get to it. So I think that's probably I don't want to say none of them are easy, but that's probably the best matchup style-wise. And then obviously, Yair with the aggressive kicking, and he's shown decent takedown defense, except for the Max fight. He presents, that's a tough riddle to solve. And then Ortega, just his boxing looks a lot better now, and his jiu-jitsu is obviously world-class. So I think those two are kind of, I think, even, because I think on the feet, Yair is more well-rounded, with, dynamic with like the flashy kicks and stuff, but then Ortega's throwing the spinning elbows just like we did. And so they both present like difficult riddles to solve, and they're both super dangerous fights. So I would say those guys are like the tougher matchup, and then Zombie would be the easier matchup. But none of them are easy fights, obviously. So at the end of the day, our goal is always like, who do we have to fight to get closer to the title? And, this time it was, last time we got to fight the number 1 guy. So now we had to do our thing and fight backwards at number 8. You can't always fight up, but now hopefully, because we just fought up, fought back, we can fight up again.
And with Calvin not being, super into jiu-jitsu, are you the person that gives him the belts, or does he train under someone else for jiu-jitsu?
No, so he's been doing jiu-jitsu for a while. So he was a blue belt. He's been a blue belt for like 10 years under Carlos Neto. But now we've changed things up after the Ige fight. So we're working with Nick Fiore, who's actually one of the 4 fighters he cornered him last week, but he's 3-0 as a pro at 155. He's a black belt, like 24 years old. One of those like nerdy, he's not a nerd, but like those jiu-jitsu nerds, they just get in there at a young age, and they're training jiu-jitsu at 12, and they know every name, every YouTube video, and just, I'm a black belt, but Nick is like, I'm a black belt just because I rolled enough. Nick's a black belt because he's a world-class grappler, and so the last year it's been like 4 or 5 days a week rolling with Nick one-on-one, and just us sitting down going over different things. That's why you saw in that little scramble they got in, I can't tell you how many times I've seen him do that same move when the guy busts out and he rolls through and then slides over, takes the back body triangle, looks for the rear naked choke, doesn't work, goes to mount. Like that was like the whole camp. So right now he's still a blue belt. We joke about it all the time. And I think right now what we're waiting is, we're in the process of just trying to find our own like new space, and then we'll get more formalized with that. And then I think the ranks will come under me and Nick, but it'll be, he's definitely not a blue belt, like he can grapple with black belts and no gi, and he's fine, but he just hasn't put the gi on enough on a consistent basis to get the purple belt yet.
So when you were into jiu-jitsu, were you more of a gi guy, or did you keep it pretty balanced, or just all no gi?
I was probably doing more gi classes just because that's what all the gyms offered. I was probably doing gi like 5 days a week, and then three or 4 classes of no gi, and then the MMA stuff. So I was definitely in the gi a lot. Because you're at jiu-jitsu schools, and there's no, they have MMA, but really it's just like, we're going to do some fake striking, and then you go fight. So out of my school, I was the first kid that took an MMA fight, and then I had 3 fights at that school, and I was like one of the only guys fighting. So then eventually I joined gyms that had fighting, but it's tough being the only one there that that's making that walk, because you're just training with a bunch of casual jiu-jitsu people and you're trying to fight MMA. It's tough.
So what would you say is your favorite mixed martial arts to teach?
I definitely like MMA grappling. Like I like getting on the wall and talking about progressions on the wall, like how to get off the wall, how to secure positions on the wall, how to like really work. Like, so the cartel will do seminars. We'll go, and I'll split it up into 2 groups. I'll have Rob and Calvin. Those guys work really well together. So they'll go over and they'll teach striking stuff. And then I'll take the other half of the group and I'm teaching stuff on the wall. And then we'll, flip, and then I'll teach the other group stuff on the wall. So really, like, I think that's really where I feel like I'm the best in terms of, like, I know I'm a good MMA coach, like that. I think that's my forte. I'm an MMA coach. So when it comes to the grappling, the stuff that's really for MMA, like the wall work and all that stuff, I feel like that's where, like, I'm really comfortable and I'm really confident in, like, what I'm saying. Whereas, like, the jiu-jitsu stuff, it's so freaking new now with these young guys talking about all the, I don't know what the moves they're talking about is. I'm like, well, I don't know what that is. It's a choke,
Yeah.
like,
electric chair, buggy, all this new stuff now.
All this stuff. And I'm like, Nick, can you show me? And so you feel like a fake black belt because I'm asking the 24-year-old what a move is. But I mean, I don't have an ego, so I have no problem. I understand that, the other coaches that we bring into the cartel are the best in their discipline. Jake's a phenomenal Muay Thai coach. I was a wrestler, but Dupree is a great college wrestling coach. And he comes in, he's had an MMA fight. He comes in and he works on the wrestling for the MMA. And Nick is a great jiu-jitsu coach. And then I'm the MMA guy that kind of like filters everything and puts it all together. And then we have a boxing coach in Sean Farley. So it's good. I don't have an ego. I know my limits in all the different disciplines. And I know there's way better coaches out there for individual ones than I am. So we bring those guys in and just make these guys better. And then, but yeah, I do enjoy getting on the wall and really like nerding out on that stuff.
And I do have a rapid fire question thing, basically answering a little bit of the New England Cartel, just like fun questions of like the superlatives of New England Cartel. Okay. So are you ready?
I'm sure I'm gonna get a lot of crap for this because they're gonna be telling me I gave the wrong answers. This is the stuff we don't bicker about, any of the important stuff. It's like, this is the stuff that we'll bicker about. We'll be like, you said I was the slowest at this, and like, it's definitely him. But
have you seen that game with the family, and then the kids will sit next to each other, and it'll be like, person least likely to remember to brush their teeth, and the kids have their eyes closed and they point, or it's like husband and wife, like person who will eat the leftovers that don't belong to them, and then they'll like point to each other. I want to think of a segment like that, but to be able to do it with a teammate. So when I'm on the East Coast, I'll be hitting you up for like different ideas and in-person stuff for sure. All right. So the first one, who on the New England Cartel has the biggest bromance with one another?
I think you're probably gonna have to say me and Jake, just because Jake's the Muay Thai coach. We have this, like, we always joke around that if we had a podcast, we called it Bantering Baldies, because I shave my head. I always joke that he's got a receding hairline. And so, like, it's like we're frenemies, but all we do is pick at each other. But at the end of the day, it's like, you say something negative about me, he's got my back right away. And like, we're like super, super close in that aspect. So I would say probably me and Jake have this like little love-hate romance going on.
That's amazing. The New England Cartel member most likely to leave a party with an Irish goodbye.
Well, even though Jake did this the other night, I would say it's most likely Calvin. I think Calvin's usually, if his family's around. No, I'm gonna say Rob. Rob would just disappear. Yeah, because Calvin's like, he'd feel too guilty, and then he'd end up saying, but Rob.
Apparently, you can save 2 days of your life with Irish goodbyes. Like, that time adds up.
Rob, don't mess around. Yeah, I can picture Rob doing the Irish goodbye. Just all of a sudden he's gone. You're like, where'd Rob go? He's like, he's in bed. Yeah, we'll go Rob.
All right, most likely to be Doug in The Hangover after a crazy night out.
Wait, which one's Doug? I
think Doug is the one that goes missing. Oh wait, maybe, I don't know.
Is he the one with the tooth that hits up? Doug in The Hangover.
Yeah, I thought Doug was the one that went missing. Like, where is Doug? That movie's so classic.
Images.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's the one missing. All right, just based off of last week, I'm gonna say it's Tom Pags. He's one of our younger fighters, one of the 4 fighters. I'll say Tom, just because he didn't actually make it into the bubble last week. He was with us, and he started to feel sick, so we had to kick him out and put him in a quarantine hotel, and then he was like on the other side of the barrier the whole week, missing. We missed him, so I'm just gonna go with Tom for that one.
Tom as the dog of the New England Cartel. I like it. I like it. And then who eats the most?
Calvin,
Okay.
100%. Like but I will say he eats healthy food. Like Calvin will go out to dinner and he'll eat like a huge salad that would be anyone else's dinner, and then that's his appetizer, and then he'll eat some appetizers, and then he'll eat like the whole meal chicken cutlet with the parm, and then he'll bring some home and he'll eat more that night. So it's just like his family. His family can eat crazy volumes. They're very healthy eaters, like, and they're very into food. You know, they got I think it's like they're a little bit Lebanese background, and they love that Mediterranean food. But Calvin, the quantities Calvin can throw back is astonishing.
That's very impressive. I mean, hey, at least it's healthy. And last one is, who is like the ball of sunshine in the gym? Just always like the upbeat person, keeping people positive vibes.
I'd say it's probably either me or Calvin. Calvin can come in, he can be in, if he's in a good mood and he can eat, and he's, you know, he comes in, he's laughing. You can't be around Calvin when he's in a happy mood and not like be smiling, you know? And he's just like a very generous person. He's always like helping everybody. He wants to talk up the younger kids. And then if it's not him, it's me. I'm always just at my expense. Like I say a lot of stupid stuff, like maybe inappropriate stuff, but I just want everybody around me laughing. I want, you know, we're going to these sessions. It doesn't have to be a grind. Let's make it fun. Like we can make fun of each other. So I just, in general, I just want everybody around me smiling, laughing, and creating good memories. And, you know, so I think if it's not Calvin, it's me. And if it's not me, it's Calvin.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for my random rapid fire questions. I thought that was so fun. Oh, and I did want to touch on the one tweet that you had in the last year, the UFC main events that you've cornered. You've got to corner against coaches from Gracie Technics, just now Rafael Cordero, and people with such great backgrounds. And you said you can't put money on these educational experiences. So what can you take away from those experiences as a coach?
I think one part is like I always say in the Max fight, I saw that any adjustments we tried to make, they were already adjusting to that ahead of it. Like they knew like, all right, he's going to try this now. So now do this. I was very impressed by that. And that taught me like, oh, you can't take your foot off the gas pedal, and you can't get like too cocky in what you're doing, because they're going to make adjustments. Like I felt that like top 5 rub of like, this is how you stay in the top 5 is when you're winning, you still change up how you're winning to counter what they're going to do to try to counter what you're doing. And I felt that. And I think I learned that. And then if you look at the Garbrandt fight, we did the same thing to that team. It's like we were ahead of them, but then we kept making little adjustments ahead of, like, before they would make their adjustment, we'd come out and we had already been doing something else. So I think I learned that. But I think the other thing I really learned is like confidence in our team's approach. You know, like I said, we bring in some of the best coaches in all the different disciplines. And the amount of confidence the last year has given me and our team, in knowing that like we're onto something special. Because, you know, you're going against these guys that everybody in MMA says are the best in the business and has the best game plans and has the best corner advice and this and that. And I'm going into these fights against them and I'm leaving, I'm feeling, and then there's sometimes where I'm like, I feel like we outcoached them. You know, I feel like we had the better game plan and I feel like we made better adjustments. So it's like, all right, we can hang with these people. And so I think if anything, after the last year, I came out knowing that like our team is onto something special. The approach that we're doing, even though 4 years ago, a lot of people said it wouldn't work because we needed a big team and you need to have all these UFC fighters on the roster to be able to get better and all this stuff. I just think it wasn't true. I think what we're doing and the way we're doing it is working. And it's just given me more confidence.